Good morning, everyone. We're pleased to be joining you via UWI-TV for the session, Building a Resilient Creative Future Beyond COVID-19, Perspectives from the Caribbean and Beyond. I'm Dr. Sonia Stanley Naya, Director and Senior Lecturer in the Institute of Caribbean Studies, and we are here today to celebrate. We're celebrating a number of things, but I begin with the lines, Jaja, give us life to live. These are lines from the Wailing Souls from the 1970s. And of course, I woke up with them this morning as inspiration for today. In spite of the realities of COVID-19, we have life and we must live. And who are the people, most of all, who have been giving us life to live through their art, through their craft, but the musicians. We have some guiding questions today. Why are we doing this? Of course, it would be remiss of us as a university providing training and leadership for national and regional development if we were not to engage at the level of the cultural, looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the cultural and creative industries. And our guiding questions, what does a creative Caribbean reimagined for the age of coronavirus look like? How can we learn from the COVID-19 crisis and its impact globally? I want to introduce for you our slate of speakers, and I will begin with Jillian Wilkinson Mcdaniel. Jillian is a Senior Director of Entertainment Policy and Monitoring in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. She has served as Principal Director of Culture and Creative Industries Policy in the same ministry. Jillian has held positions in the private sector and government, working in trade policy, investment, promotion, and creative industries, primarily film, music, and entertainment. Mrs. Mcdaniel holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Washington School of Law in Seattle, Washington, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Philosophy and Political Science from Long Island University, Brooklyn campus, New York. She's, of course, currently pursuing an M.Phil Ph.D. at the University of the West Indies in the Institute of Caribbean Studies. And Jillian is going to speak to us today on the whole idea of analyzing the impact of COVID-19 on the Jamaican creative sector. Jillian.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naya. It is a pleasure to be here, and I just want to thank you for the invitation on behalf of the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. I am actually going to be looking at a survey that the Ministry of Culture did in relation to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the creative sector. The survey really, it was in terms of a sample size, the survey had 320 respondents. We had about 28 spoilers in terms of duplicates. And I will bring up my slides now in relation to that. But the reason really for the Ministry of Culture to actually do a convenient survey of this nature was simply because we needed to have additional data that will inform policy and the direction that the ministry ought to take, the strategic direction that the ministry ought to take post-COVID. Because really and truly, we have to be in the mind of the post-COVID strategy as government in order to meet the needs of all the creative sectors. So the survey, as I said, had 292 respondents from various industries, from film, music, visual and performing arts. We had publishers, book publishers, we had writers, and we had animators. And so it was a fairly broad cross-section of the creative industries. What we found was that 95.5% of the persons from the time the survey was administered, from March 23 all the way through to April 30, 95.5% of the respondents had experienced loss of income as a result of COVID-19 due to cancellation of bookings, project delays. Some you had persons who were to take up study or a residency in different countries, and those were, of course, cancelled. 96.4 of those.
We could, of course, move to another presenter until Jillian's connection is sorted. Let me introduce Mr. Ewan Simpson. Mr. Simpson is an attorney at law with a Master of Laws in Intellectual Property, and he balances his duties as General Manager for the Legal and Corporate Services in one of Jamaica's public regulatory bodies, with chairmanship of the Jamaica Reggae Industry Association, deputy chairmanship of the Entertainment Advisory Board, as well as the more important double whopper of being simultaneously an adjunct lecturer and an M.Phil Ph.D. candidate in the Institute of Caribbean Studies. The concept of the need for balance and partnerships is something he clearly knows a thing or two about, and hence his need to address us on the role of public-private partnerships in a reimagined creative sector. Mr. Simpson will be speaking to us on the role of public-private partnerships, sustaining creative industries in times of vulnerability. And I'm just going to take the opportunity, colleagues, to introduce all our speakers while we see if we get Jillian back on track. If we don't get Jillian back on track, we will just go ahead to Mr. Ewan Simpson's presentation. So I'll tell you now about Dr. Mariel Barrow. Dr. Mariel Barrow is the coordinator of the Cultural and Creative Industries Innovative Fund at the Caribbean Development Bank. She's responsible for coordinating programming under the CIF for the bank's 19 borrowing member countries. She's designing programming, managing grantee projects, and mobilizing additional resources for the fund. Dr. Barrow Magnan is a Fulbright scholar, social entrepreneur, arts management consultant, and visual artist. Her passion and vocation is to realize real social transformation through arts-based socioeconomic interventions within high-risk communities. And she has worked across the Caribbean, in the USA, Africa, in cultural programming, and as a consultant in the creative industries in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, as well as CARICOM. She founded Caribbean in Transit in 2010, a nonprofit with a volunteer team of more than 33 professionals operating across some 13 countries. We also have for you today Miss Dalia Harris. Many of you would have heard of, seen in action Dalia Harris. I call her a polymath. Dalia has been a media practitioner for over 25 years, working in print, radio, and television. CEO of DMH Productions Limited, Dalia Harris has steadily made her mark as a writer, actress, producer, and director, mounting several award-winning and critically acclaimed theatrical and television productions. Among them is Jamaica's #1 television drama, Ring Games. She is a multiple nominee and winner of Jamaica's Actor Boy Awards. Her work in theater has earned her a place in the Caribbean Hall of Fame, the Bigger High Achievers Award, as well as the Flair Magazine Distinguished Woman Award. She's the convener of the annual Jamaica Women in Theatre Festival. Dalia presently hosts Jamaica's #1 television morning show, Smile Jamaica, It's Morning Time, and the immensely popular afternoon radio program, Two Live Crew, on RJR's 94 FM. Dalia, of course, holds a first-class honors degree, a double major in English and Media and Communications from the UWI, as well as a master's degree in Communication for Social and Behavioral Change. I now move to introduce to you Ms. Tamara Kaminska. When we said we were talking about perspectives from the Caribbean and beyond, Tamara is from beyond the Caribbean. Hailing from Poland, she holds a master's in philosophy and a postgraduate diploma in cultural management from the University of Economics. Since 2012, she worked as deputy director for the Katowice City of Gardens Culture Institution, which organized events such as the Jazz Art Festival, the Sound Gardens Festival, and annual city anniversary celebrations. With a formidable team, Tamara organized a bid for the city of Katowice to join the Unesco Creative Cities Network. And it is in this capacity that we have asked Tamara to join us this morning. Tamara worked on the music sector development policy in Katowice, and as a representative of Katowice, she was responsible for the bid to organize the UNESCO Creative Cities annual meeting in 2018, and its realization after subsequent successful application. In January 2018, she was elected a leader of the UNESCO Creative Cities Network Music Subnetwork and member of the UCCN Steering Committee. As of October 2018, she's the director of the Music Export Poland office in Warsaw and the independent expert of the UNESCO National Commission in Poland. And that today completes the introduction for our speakers. Do we have Jillian back online? No, we do not. Okay, so can I ask Mr. Simpson, who is going to be speaking to us on the role of public-private partnerships sustaining creative industries in times of vulnerability, to speak to us?
Thank you very much, Dr. Naya. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I was hoping that I would have had the benefit of playing tag team with Jillian in a more seamless way, because she normally comes chock full of data and information that the government has a duty to collect. And she usually presents that very well, very succinctly, and it would have presented the perfect background for what I'm about to talk about. But nevertheless, we press on, and I'm sure Jillian will return with all the information we like to hear from her. But let's talk about the role of public-private partnerships in, of course, sustaining creative industries in times of vulnerability. And the first question that pops out to me in looking at this topic is, when really are we not vulnerable as creatives in the Caribbean? Because we suffer from a locational advantage, but a historical disadvantage. And because of that, we tend to suffer from global shocks or internal shocks in a way that is not common across the world. But nevertheless, how do we engage public-private partnerships to lessen those shocks, to eliminate them if possible? But first, what is a public-private partnership? How are public-private partnerships defined in this part of the world? That may be the start of what we need to consider. That may be the start of determining whether or not public-private partnerships are the way to go. The Development Bank of Jamaica quotes the government of Jamaica's PPP policy and speaks to it as a procurement contract between the public and private sectors. And then it says it engages the proficiency of each party, the public and the private. And each party is therefore focused on designing or financing or building or operating an infrastructure project or providing a service through the appropriate sharing of risk and reward. It is going to be important to look at that definition to determine why this is generally not applied to the cultural and creative industries as much as it is applied to manufacturing and shipping and other such endeavor. But the characteristics that we look at, again from the DBJ perspective, again from the GOJ perspective, and we're talking regional, but the regional governments tend to take the same approach to these things. The characteristics involve arrangement with a private sector entity, delegating one or more functions to that private sector entity. Usually, therefore, the private sector entity has to either design or build, expand or develop, or operate, maintain or rehabilitate, or finance the asset or the service. Now, of course, it requires the sharing of risk, significant risk, and it involves public infrastructure or asset or the service provided for the public benefit. This sounds very theoretical and so on, but it is important to set this background, because with this perspective, we understand why cultural and creative endeavor is usually not contemplated. We talk about building ports, we talk about building factories, we talk about power supply, power generation, we talk about large farming projects, traditional sources of sustenance, traditional but not optimal sources of sustenance for us as creative Caribbean people. It is not anecdotal that what we produce with the greatest competitive advantage in this part of the world is creative products. In this part of the world, we give definition to what is called the orange economy. The creative economy, the orange economy, brings together sectors whose main purpose, and this is what UNESCO says, whose main purpose is the production or reproduction, promotion or dissemination, or marketing of goods, services, and activities that have cultural, artistic, or patrimonial content. That's what UNESCO says. And if we think about that, the region's biggest product, tourism, and this goes without saying, is what we ought to focus on. Now, what do I mean by focusing on tourism? Not focusing on, as some of my friends like to say, heads to beds, or just bringing people through the ports, but focusing on how this epitomizes for us the orange economy, the creative industries, and how they work in an interwoven way to provide sustenance for our people. Not just sustenance in the economic sense, but release and sustenance in the intellectual sense and in the spiritual sense. So you have to bear with me for speaking from the Jaria perspective as the practitioners of entertainment, but also the academic perspective in looking at how did we come to be treating creative industries, which clearly epitomize our largest potential, as something which is hardly significant. If our PPPs don't focus on the creative economy, the orange economy, on maximizing the potential for the orange economy, then we are literally sabotaging ourselves. So we took a look at the Caribbean Development Bank and how they approach PPPs. We took a wider look. And the majority of projects speak to risk mitigation in farming, climate change, economic shock, manufacturing. All of these are useful. They are part of the traditional perspective on the development of an economy. Of course, we come with a heavy burden of European education. And education is not being used necessarily only in a formal sense. We come with that heavy burden, which says that we are to respond to their version of the Industrial Revolution, where they had factories and they had the steel, this steel and cast iron were their primary route to development. But that was them, and that was then. What is our competitive advantage as a region? Our competitive advantage as a region is in that little girl downtown Kingston, that little girl in Arima, that little girl up in the hills in St. Lucia, who understands that what comes out of her intrinsically as an utterance, or what comes out of her intrinsically as a move, is what will provide for her and for her family as sustenance. Her creativity is what it is. The world has moved in that direction. COVID has taught us that it is not always about the literal. So how do we package our products? How do we place in context our creative products and give them the kind of optimal opportunity to earn for our people, and thus give us the stability that we need, give us the stability that we desire, and give us the stability that we deserve as a people. Public-private partnerships, therefore, need to be reimagined so that we can reimagine our regional economies. When we speak of infrastructure, there's a perspective on infrastructure. Yes, it needs to be block and steel, but it doesn't need to be block and steel. And we realized in the last 8 weeks, at least, that a lot of block and steel became redundant. And if you did not have reliable Wi-Fi, if you did not have reliable access to the information superhighway, as opposed to Highway 2000 or the North Coast Highway, you were out of the loop. You couldn't receive critical information. What does that say to us and about what we prioritize in looking at PPPs? The facilities for packaging, the facilities for dissemination and distribution of what we produce innately, what we have a competitive advantage in, those facilities will be crucial. And that is what we need PPPs to be looking at. That is where we need private sector to be taking the risk or leading in the design, and the public sector to be leading in the legislative and policy framework that facilitates it and that encourages investors to invest in what we have seen as co-curricular or extracurricular for far too long in this part of the world. I could go on, but I think I have used my 10 minutes sufficiently, right, Dr. Naya?
Thank you very much, Mr. Simpson. I want to now return to Jillian, but just to remind you that we are celebrating 33 years of existence as an Institute of Caribbean Studies, centered on pedagogy, cultural pedagogy, policy, and creative industries. And I want to say how proud I am as the director of the Institute of Caribbean Studies to be sharing that with you. And I'll tell you as we go on in the program a little bit more about the Institute. And to say also that this is a first in a series, the Humanities in Action virtual seminar series that we decided to engage you on for this morning. We will be joined again next week by a full slate of speakers for the second part in the series. So let me introduce again Jillian, Senior Director, Entertainment, Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, speaking to us on analyzing the impact of COVID-19 on the Jamaican creative sector. And while Jillian brings up her slides, just want to give you some details. Are we ready with you, Jillian? The Institute of Caribbean Studies was established in 1987 with the mandate to engage in outreach. And it has evolved into a full teaching program, full teaching institute with programs at the undergraduate level in music and performance studies, cultural and creative industries, and entertainment and cultural enterprise management. And at the Ph.D. level in cultural studies, MA in cultural studies, and M.Phil also in cultural studies. So we have a full slate of programs. Over to you, Jillian.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Naya. And unlike all your other speakers, I had the pleasure of going through my slides. So I will go through them quickly. Once again, I am Jillian Wilkinson Mcdaniel from the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. And I'm presenting this morning on the COVID-19 survey that we did of what turned out to be 320 respondents within the culture and creative industries and entertainment sector here in Jamaica. In the end, we had 28 spoilage. So we had actually 290 of the survey recipients, 292, I beg your pardon, that that really we were able to use in terms of our analysis. This convenience survey was intended to actually give the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport a roadmap, some kind of understanding of what was happening to our creatives within this time of pandemic. And so just to start out, I would say that it was very clear to us that the impact of the financial loss on the sector would have been great. And it was borne out in this convenience sampling that we did. So we discovered that 95.5% of the respondents experienced some loss of income due to COVID, due to cancellation of projects, project delays, etc. 96.4% of the organizations that responded to the survey experienced loss of income. And we made a distinction between organizations and individuals. That was one of the questions, whether you were an organization or you were an individual. And 95.4% of the individuals experienced loss versus a little over 1% of organizations 1% more of organizations experience loss of income. The average income loss for both individuals and organizations was about 1.65 million Jamaican dollars, a minimum of 10,000 Jamaican and a maximum of 68.5 million Jamaican. So within that 1 month period, what we were able to extrapolate was that income loss to the sector was around 423.45 million Jamaican dollars. And really and truly, and how did we get to that? Because we have an estimate of the Jamaican creative sector being between 6,000 to 12,000 persons. And those are things that we will have to refine over time, but the survey certainly did give us a greater understanding of what was happening within the sector. So we asked the question about the estimated loss for the month. So right here, this slide is just showing you with 6,000 to 12,000 practitioners. If we were to estimate loss for 1 month for 6,000 practitioners, that would be 9.6 billion Jamaican dollars. Over a 2 month period, 19.2 billion. And it goes on, and 3 months, 28.8 billion. The point is that we can see from this very small convenience sampling the impact and the importance of the creative sectors to the economy. So we asked the question of individuals now and discovered that, so the question was, have you or your organization experienced loss of income as a result of COVID-19? And the majority of persons who experienced loss of income were actually performing artists, singers, dancers, DJs, instrumentalists, etc. And that is that red bar, which is over 161 persons, and those were performing artists. And it makes perfect sense actually, because the performing arts is more characterized by freelancers, persons who are contract workers, and so it makes perfect sense that we would see this kind of numbers for the performing arts. The second most set of creatives that experience
Not sure if we've lost Jillian again. There's something, seems to be her connection. And this is, I really wanted to start with these figures to center our attention on the kind of impact that we are experiencing in relation to the cultural and creative industries. We have a tendency in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, we have only come to an understanding of the kind of role that the cultural and creative industries play in our social and cultural landscape and economic landscape. And so I really wanted to begin with these figures to have us really concentrate on just the kind of impact. We heard about 223.45 million in income loss based on the survey. But I want to have us not, waste our time this morning, but to let me switch to Dr. Mariel Barrow, who is going to speak to us on the initiatives for sustaining the cultural and creative industries in the Caribbean. And I introduced her earlier, but let me just remind us that she is coordinator of the Cultural and Creative Industries Innovative Fund at the Caribbean Development Bank. Mariel?
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Naya. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with these esteemed colleagues in the cultural and creative sector. This morning, I just want to introduce a little bit, and give an overview of the impact as well, but more from a qualitative standpoint than the quantitative standpoint that Jillian was sharing, as well as go into, of course, the work that the Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund at the CDB is doing to support creative practitioners across our 19 borrowing member countries. So moving on to the first slide, we have the CI fishbone diagram, and that essentially shows the kinds of challenges that we've always been facing in the sector. The brain drain, the weak advocacy, the lack of coordination, geographic dispersal, and all of these areas. Added to that, we have bouncing in social distancing, of course, as a result of COVID-19. So as Jillian was sharing, this has impacted the performing arts sector in a major way, especially, but it has impacted the visual arts, it has impacted fashion as well, because people can't go out to buy in the same way, people cannot attend artistic shows and so on. So we're seeing, moving on to the next slide, just some of the same things that Jillian was sharing, the cancellation of live shows, exhibitions, festivals, and trade fairs. Grant funding sources, importantly, are being redirected to healthcare and other areas. Boutiques, of course, and other venues for sales are closed, and part-time jobs, as well as some, somewhat full-time jobs, are cancelled. And we have residencies and other in-person paid training and development opportunities postponed or cancelled. Some persons say even for 2 years down the road, bookings that they have been cancelled, and that's quite a scary prospect. So moving to the next slide, we have what the old normal looked like for persons in the entertainment sector. Nicholas Rivero, an international performer, producer, speaks about it like this. There's a special kind of magic that lives in creating shared moments in time, knowing that we are creating new experiences for those around us. And we have to look at the impact of this sector in terms of the creative sector on surrounding industries. So we're talking about the travel and lodging industries, as Yuan shared, buses, tour buses, airlines, hotels, trucking and shipping, moving of materials and equipment, as well as, of course, the artistic products themselves, concept developers, studios and agencies, and of course we have the artists, speakers, the hosts, the talent, the promoters, sound and lighting equipment, and stadium office staff, right? The staff of the venues. So the impact is really wide-reaching. And what creative practitioners have had to do, moving to the next Rona reality, as some of the artists have termed it, is really to pivot, right? Whereas in, for restaurants and so on, some countries still keep restaurants open and allow curbside pickup or delivery. We don't have that option. We don't have the option of, tours still happening or smaller events still taking place. So the creative sector has the opportunity now, and I'm sharing it as an opportunity, because we have to look at crises as a moment for opportunities as well. The negative effects are obvious. So it's an opportunity for creatives to pivot and to rest during this time, because a lot of them are fielding multiple jobs, multiple income streams. So they never have very much downtime because of the gig economy. So it's an opportunity for them to rest. It's an opportunity for them to communicate and to create. So this time is about building audiences and networks, learning something new, and if possible, in doing these things, trying to generate some revenue. Moving to the next idea, we have what we're talking about in terms of resilience, recovery, and sustainability. And that's how we are couching it at SIF. This is what we are about at this time. We have to learn from each other in this process, and we have to really think now about what that looks like. So I just want to share a few trends. Of course, we have the online concerts by individual artists, and I'm showing one here by a Trinidadian vocalist by the name of Vonette Bigford, where she was sponsored by Digicel to create an online concert at her home. But we also have online concerts by by individual artists, and they're not being paid for that, of course. It's their social service. They're happening via Facebook, they're happening via Instagram. Some persons are doing it via Zoom and then streaming live. And it's always, it's to the benefit of the mass public, of course, but sometimes we have to recognize that it takes a lot from the creative practitioners. We see artists such as an internationally renowned Caribbean opera singer, Janine DeBeek, launching her own online music video that she edited herself. But then we have the international trends where we see things like in European cities, we're seeing drive-in concerts, drive-in concert series. So we would use, old theaters, old drive-in theaters to create concerts where persons stay in their cars to view the concert. Of course, there's some logistical challenges in such a model that would need to be worked out, but it's definitely a good option to explore. I want to share some other trends that I found really, really interesting and exciting with artists, because this is also about motivating and recognizing that our artists are always transformative, that they use the crises to really build something new and to reimagine our society. So we have another artist who created this series called the Rona Diaries online. And it's an artist who, he's a graphic designer and visual artist, but he became a fashion designer by going to fashion school and then developing his prints and applying it to all kinds of objects, from sneakers to curtains to cushions and so on. So he created what he called the Rona Diaries. And these Rona Diaries are not only marketing and advertising his products, but they're also performing a social service in that they are, it's kind of like a stream of consciousness of how persons feel, or of how creatives feel going through this time. So he says, I just wait a bit for the clickbait news to subside to find the more substantial issue. Stay home and stay safe. Rona Diary, April 15th. I fold my way. You do yours. Cool? And he's talking about how he folds, like clothes. And these things are, just the random thoughts, from the depressing ones to the, to the radical thoughts and creative thoughts, to the mundane, to the depressive ones that you have to kind of pass out during periods like this. So, but we also see the artist doing another kind of social good. And we have here another artist by the name of a graphic designer by the name of Christophe Pear, and his company is called Design by Spirit. And he put out a campaign where he looks at the disparity in privilege within this notion of home. And so he puts these posters that these frames, and for example, he says, cruelty begins at home. There's no pain like home. Home is where the hurt is. And whereas for a certain level of society, home is where the fun is, the joy is, the sanctuary is, there's another reality that so many are facing, and he is making us aware and more responsive to that reality, and more responsible in that sense. Then we have, I'm sharing, in terms of regional industry initiatives, a young creative practitioner. Well, she's an entertainment and sports lawyer who has produced a series called The Business of Carnival and Tourism in Trinidad and Tobago. And so she has a campaign called Stay Home and Level Up, meaning, build yourself, use this opportunity to build yourself, to share with other creatives and to think about where do you need to go from here. Similarly, we have an academic, Dr. Joanne Tull, who started an Instagram series called Conversations with the Doc, right? And she's really giving advice on how to navigate this time, what kinds of things creatives should be focusing on to develop themselves. In Jamaica, we have Kingston Creative, who has put on a digital creative bootcamp and has a whole series of strategies to deal with the COVID-19 crisis, including providing humanitarian support by raising funds to pay for underprivileged artists and so on to create masks and then to distribute them free of charge within high-risk communities. So we see that pivoting happening, that resting, that communicating, and so on. In terms of the work that SIP has been doing, our work has always been geared towards resilience, and not so much recovery, but building. But interestingly, the solutions are very similar, because we've been trying to create a lot of online resources for practitioners, because we recognize the region is so separated by the sea, of course. So one of the ways that we deal with that is by creating online resources. And so this is very effective in this time. So we are in the midst of, completing our SIP Creative Talk toolkits, which are toolkits on, pertinent issues, thematic issues within the creative industries that artists and practitioners need to really be aware of and need to dig deep into. We are producing an online grant writing course, and we are also working on creating creative industry country profiles for each of our 19 borrowing member countries. And we're asking all persons to get involved in that initiative, because we all need access to that, to those materials, to that information. Where are the venues? What educational programs are being offered, especially during this time? What are the statistics? When we need to write a grant and we need to grab some statistics, sometimes they do exist, but we don't know where to find them. So it's also about making these statistics accessible to the general public, and of course to our practitioners. In addition, we're looking at creating intellectual property toolkits. Of course, in terms of communication with our stakeholders, we have regular consultations, mostly on Friday afternoons between 2:30 and 4:30, where we help practitioners brainstorm projects that they're interested in bringing to the fore to apply for the grant funds that we offer, and discussing really the criteria of the fund. So just to give you a really quick overview of SIF, SIF is a multi-donor fund established in 2017 with initial capitalization of $2.6 million US dollars from the Caribbean Development Bank, and we are inviting other agencies to contribute to that fund. We have several agencies on our steering committee. We have, of course, CDB. We have the OECS, Caribbean Export Development Agency, CARICOM, the Caribbean Development Fund, and a representative for the regional directors of culture in CARICOM. So this is not a CDB-only initiative. While it is housed at CDB, there are several agencies that are involved in managing and directing what the fund is doing. We have our pillars, which are innovation, collaboration, and sustainability. And so, of course, those pillars are very much in tune with what we need to see in terms of building resilience for the creative industries at this time. So in terms of, directly what we have done in terms of a COVID-19 response, we have put out grants to the tune of US $100,000 for emergency grant relief funds in the music, festivals, and carnival subsectors. That grant call is closing on May 20th, so you still have a small window to get your grant applications in, and you can access it at caribbank.org/SIF. Now, we are also, of course, restructuring current projects to forefront online engagement because our face-to-face engagement will be limited at this time. And yesterday we hosted a partners meeting to ascertain further effects of COVID-19 across the region in terms of agencies and what other agencies are doing to address the needs of the sector. And we'll be sharing more on that later on so that persons will be more aware of the resources that are available to them through the range of agencies, range of partner agencies that we have working with us. I mentioned a little bit earlier the country profiles that we're working on, which will also include some questions on COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19 across our 19 borrowing member countries. And we hope you'll be able to collaborate with some of the agencies online here to, to bring that information together for the different countries as well. The SIF emergency grants are for persons who have lost income. So for the performing sector who have lost income as a result of COVID-19 and they want to put on online programming. But we also have a number of other grants available. So the SIF grant is not the only grant the SIF emergency grant is not the only grant that persons can apply for. We have 6 grants open at this time. And so we really encourage persons to take a look, because this is the time when you have a little bit more opportunity to sit down and to write that grant and to think about it carefully. So use that opportunity to build your business for the future. These are some of the grants that we have open at this time: the data intelligence grants, and then improving competitiveness grants under music, festivals and carnivals, and accelerator partnerships. So earlier you spoke about festival tourism, or tourism in particular. We have accelerator partnerships in festival tourism, intellectual property data collection, and festivals accelerators for festivals and carnivals as well. We also want to invite persons to subscribe to our consultant directory and to our database to become aware of the resources, the range of resources that we are offering at this time. And so the information is up on the slides as to how you can access that, and this information can also be distributed. So I want to end with, where we should go from here, some action. We have a fragmented approach to the development of the creative industry sector, and the need for concrete and streamlined actions following each one of these kinds of initiatives, each one of these webinars, in order to really build a strategic resilience resilience and recovery mechanism for the region. We also need, I believe, a shared platform for contributing and updating information towards streamlined action. And we had discussed that in our partners webinar yesterday, so that practitioners know what is available. And then finally, we invite persons to contribute to our multi-donor fund framework in order to increase the pool of funds available to practitioners across the region in a strategic and streamlined manner. So, I really look forward to hearing what the other presenters have to share and how we can work together to really build the resilience of the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mariel. That is a lot of food for thought, and certainly a lot of information, practical solutions as well. And I like the fact that we are now getting a really full grasp of all of the ways in which we have both quantitative and qualitative data in relation to this pandemic and the impact on the Caribbean. So I want to thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
I want to now switch to have Dalia's voice. Dalia is, of course, a media specialist, founder of Jamaica Women in Theatre Festival, and she's going to be talking about multitasking in the Jamaican creative sector. Dalia is, of course, I call her polymath. I don't know when she sleeps. She is such a vibrant soul. Indeed, a Renaissance woman multi-layered personality. And if you don't know, she's one of Jamaica's best female stand-up comedians. I introduced Dalia in a fulsome way earlier, but want to just tell you a little bit about her. Over to you, Dalia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naya. Interesting conversation, and I'm going to keep going back to some of the things that were said before. Multitasking. Before getting to that, though, I have to say, the creative in the Jamaican context, I think, doesn't have an option but to multitask. Many of us. And that's primarily because we have to find multiple streams of income in order to survive. The actor doesn't necessarily have a play every night or every month that is going to pay the bills. The storyteller in the community, and when I hear a lot of what's being said, it's culture and the creative industries is transformative. It is a social good. And so a lot of what we do, people think we should be paid for it because God has put us on this earth to bless people, and we should be happy. And I keep saying to them, I can't go to the shop and give a joke and say I'm a comedian, give me a pound of rice. And so there are realities for us as creatives that I think the way we are viewed and the way people see us really has to be adjusted, and particularly now with what's happening with COVID-19. I saw the figures from Jillian, and I couldn't help but think, I know that captures, and it was a survey, so people would have responded, but I felt like, did it capture our traditional people, folk forms? Did it capture the lady who sells the gizzard and the drops and the blue drawers and the, you know, the little food where, you know, in the community is the heritage food? What about the cassava lady and the bami lady? And so it still didn't capture a lot of people on whom creative industries and culture is how they survive. And so I think that the pandemic has affected many more people than we think, because the nature of the creative really is not to create for our own benefit, but it is to create for others. And so when a pandemic comes that affects the others for whom we're creating, then naturally you'll see that we become extremely affected by it. And most of the sectors, if you go in them, you'll find that the creative people are affected. So multitasking is what we do. Some of us love it because we have different skills and we don't want to put some down and not do some. Some we have to do it because we don't have no option but to do it. So we have to have the 9-to-5 job and still try to do what makes us passionate. And so I looked up the word multitasking, and it was interesting. Dr. Susan Wenchek says it's not really multitasking. It's what happens is switching, task switching. There's a school of thought that multitasking reduces your productivity by 40%. I hope not, or else I would be dying of hunger. But that's what it says. So I said, all right, let's look at it from our perspective. Most creatives, as I say, activate multiple streams of income. In some instances, the streams of income are similar. So if I'm a writer, I can write copy for advertisers. I can write copy for radio, so I can work in an advertising or a marketing agency as a writer. But I can also write plays, and I can also write comedies, dramas. So different tasks, but similar because it's writing. Some of them are totally different. And so I will work in media, television and film, which is a totally different thing than being on stage, which is different from convening the Women in Theatre Festival. And so there are different ways that we multitask. One of the things is we have to accept our limits when we're multitasking. A day doesn't have more than 24 hours. So if I'm going to multitask, I start first of all with what is my budget? Because if you follow the creative, we would do a million things. We would make 10 movies in a year, 3 television shows, 9 plays, 6 albums, and everything that we can. But we have to look at realistically, what is my budget and what am I able to do? And what are my resources? What's the human capital that I'm working with at this time? So if I'm writing a musical, I'm going to call you on because I have a musical in my head, but I know I can't compose music, but I know I can call him and he will come and help me. So what's the human capital that you have and what are the resources that you have? I find that we don't share resources enough in order to multitask effectively. So I'll take, for example, theater, what we do on stage. I will do a play for 3 months, but at the end of the 3 months, what am I going to do with a fridge and a stove and a sofa that was in an apartment for the play that I had? The next practitioner that comes up with another play that may need a stove or a fridge and is also going to only use it for 3 months can use the stuff that I have, but I find that we don't share that kind of information. So we end up starting from scratch and stretching resources that we don't have, and so we don't maximize on the things that are available to us. Also, how does your personality facilitate multitasking? Are you somebody that once you start a task, you become so engaged by it that you can't see anything else? Are you a person that gets easily distracted? So you start one, but then something come and I really love this one, so let me make this one stay a little bit. Or this one's harder, so I won't do this one. So you have to understand the kind of personality that you have, and does it facilitate multitasking implementation? Also, I distinguish what is urgent from what is important. And that's two totally different things. Because urgent means it should have been done from 2 weeks ago. Important means I have to get it done. But when do I need to get it done? So I prioritize the things as they appear to me. I also try to avoid distractions. If I open Facebook, I will never get a play done because I'm going to go on and I'm going to play mahjong tiles. So you have to understand, I said to people, I can write with the television happening, so I can listen to a show and write. But if I turn on music, I'm going to stop writing and become totally absorbed by the music. So you have to minimize what are the distractions. Sonia will tell you sometimes she'll see me at a certain spot, sitting in a corner until 2, 3, 4 a.m. because I know nobody's going to come there. But if I'm at home, it won't happen. So if you're going to multitask, you have to create an environment that is going to keep you focused on the tasks that you're doing, because you're doing many tasks at once. And so you have to find an environment that works for you. Working blocks of time. She says, I never sleep. I sleep, man. When I sleep, though, is the question. But so if I am working on something for television and I'm doing ring games, and I know that ring games is going to, editing is going to overlap with Miss Jamaica World, then I know that, well, I can edit for 3 hours from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. I can't do Miss Jamaica World business 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. because I literally have to call and speak to people who are awake and who will actually listen to what I'm saying. So I do blocks of time, what times work, and try to be disciplined in that block of time. So if 5 o'clock comes and editing has to be finished, it has to be finished. And the same thing happens with filming. When we go out to film and we say, listen, we're going to stop filming at 6, at 6 we have to stop because something else has to happen at that time. I work on related tasks together. So for the Masters in Communication for Social and Behavior Change, I did work on Miss Lou and on her media communications and her communication development work, Miss Lou's Views. But while I was doing research on Miss Lou's Views, it gave me the opportunity to research Miss Lou's work on country weddings and how country weddings used to happen. And so while I was doing the research on the paper, I wrote a play about country weddings because I got it from the information that I pulled from Miss Lou. So I'm saying multitasking means making a determination of what is the bigger picture, what are the things that I need to achieve, and how can these smaller objectives help me to attain that goal. So I plan ahead. a plan ahead, because I know that 5 things going to buck up into each other. So if I'm going to write a play that's going to be open in June, and I have the master's paper that needs to go in by a particular time, it means I have to go start looking at Miss Lou from 2 years before. So when people say, how do you do the research on Miss Lou and then write the paper? I said, the research on Miss Lou was 2 years ago. I just did it, put it down, and then when I was ready to write, then I wrote. So you have to literally plan not just days, but weeks and months and years ahead on how you're going to get it done. And then in COVID-19 time, to me, I find that it's an exciting time, and I'll tell you why. For us, even as practitioners, the musicians are better able to capture larger crowds. They tour. We don't tour as often, and there are very few touring companies that do plays overseas. So for us, the ability to engage audiences overseas that we would never have been able to do, COVID-19 has given us that opportunity. So I often say to actors and playwrights and producers that don't be restricted by the physical building. So COVID has shut down the physical building, but the play goes on. And so we have to find ways of creating content that will give us the kinds of opportunities that we normally would not have had. Audiences are also multitasking. So they're at home, they're teaching the children, but they're becoming more engaged online. They're watching more things online. And so we have to move whatever it is that we have, our stories. We have to move our songs. We have to move our engagement to an online platform because there are more people. I tell them church shut down now, but some church never see 5,000 people until COVID. And that's because COVID has created a platform that we are able to touch, feel, and still, engage people. Our challenge, and Miss Barrow, I love you. Let me start by saying that. But I find that sometimes the creative gets so frustrated. Jillian will agree with what I'm saying because she's heard it. We get so frustrating with the development. It's like development is never ending, and that we can't seem to find a balance between creating and developing at the same time. And so we feel sometimes that we're in this never-ending cycle of workshops and seminars, and we're always preparing for this moment that's going to happen. And for a lifetime, it just never seems to happen until people get frustrated. And then if we are not turning over income, if we are not getting audiences, then the development really is, it won't be sustainable, because we need that aspect as well. And so sometimes I find that it's not as balanced as we hope it would be. So we're developing, but we have to showcase. And then we'll develop some more. And then we'll showcase some more. And as we grow and develop, then we continue to grow audiences to make income and to build the industry into what it really should be. So I'm excited about where COVID-19 can take us as content creators. Can you imagine the little woman in the community that used to just tell the stories at the shop is now able to tell stories to Jamaicans all over the world? But we have to be prepared for it, and we have to decide on how we're going to do it. That's my few minutes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very, very much, Dalia. We couldn't have asked for more in terms of advice on coping. How does the creative cope in times of crisis? And even outside of a crisis, the habits you develop to sustain you when there is no crisis, those are the very same habits. And it is about cultivating good habits. It's about being able to cope, being efficient, being able to plan ahead. Dalia, those were very, very important concerns and advice. I want to know, turn to Tamara. When we said we would be sharing the Caribbean and beyond, Tamara joins us from beyond, from Poland, from the Unesco Creative Cities Network, and she's going to be talking to us about some of the global perspectives and responses from creative cities to COVID-19. Over to you, Tamara.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. Thank you, everyone. It was really very, very inspiring what you just said. And honestly, although I should present the global perspectives and global responses, they're not very far away from what you present. And I feel the sense of community that really makes me feel that maybe that this crisis might cost something better than we thought that it will. So just coming back to UNESCO Creative Cities Network, just for those of you who don't know what it is, because I guess that they might don't know. It's a network that was established in 2004 to promote the collaboration and cooperation between cities that have identified creativity as a main strategic factor for their sustainable development. Currently, we have 249 cities, 2,000 maybe in the future, hopefully. And among them, 49 creative cities in the field of music. Kingston is one of them, Katowice as well, which I represent. And regarding responses and perspectives, well, all around the world, the situation looks more or less the same. The governments have declared the state of emergency, which means in particular that schools are closed, that they advise us to practice social distancing, but also it means that all events, among them music events, are postponed or cancelled. And like Jillian already mentioned, I'm very, very sorry that you weren't able, Jillian, to just show us all numbers and figures. But more or less around the world, it looks the same. It caused a really huge loss for music industry. Also, the situation influenced the other very important part of
I hope we haven't lost Tamara. I wonder, it seems as though because everybody's on the internet, we are having challenges this morning. This is all part of the going with the online life. Many of us have been experiencing outages, and hopefully we will get Tamara back shortly. I know we do have Jillian. Can we take Jillian's presentation now then? Perhaps go back to where we left off to hear about the impact of COVID-19 on the Jamaican creative sector. And once Tamara signs back in, we will be able to take her presentation from where she left off. So let's go back to Jillian Wilkinson Mcdaniel from the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, talking about the impact of COVID-19 on the Jamaican creative sector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nayo. I apologize, colleagues and listeners and viewers, for the challenges, the technological challenges that we have been experiencing. But I believe that did you want me to go back to the slide that I was on the respondents or you wanted me to start from the beginning?
Perhaps summarize from the beginning, Jillian, so that those who have just joined us, welcome to our viewers online at uitv.org, UETV Global. Let me just welcome those who are watching us on Facebook, our students, our colleagues, those from out of the region. Welcome all. And Jillian, just summarize for those who are just joining us.
Okay, so just to say that the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport conducted some convenience sampling in relation to the impact of COVID-19, the financial, the economic and the social impact of COVID-19 on creative practitioners. We had a sample size of, in the end, 292 persons, and that indicated, and it was a wide gamut of persons from the various sectors. So we had film, music, and book and publishing, as well as visual and performing artists. And so in looking at the survey, we recognized that Jamaica really needed to make some very strategic decisions in relation to how we treat with the creative sectors post COVID-19. First slide. Can you advance the first slide, please? Okay. So the estimated financial loss from, as I had indicated before, and for those who are just joining us, the estimated financial loss to the sector was on average for the month, and the survey ran from March 23 through to April 30. That average was 1.6 million Jamaican dollars, with 95.5% of the sample experiencing loss of income. The total income loss for 1 month is estimated to be 9.6 billion Jamaican dollars, based on the size, the relative size of the creative industries and creative practitioners in Jamaica. But you will note that that Dalia did speak to the woman, the heritage, those kinds of the traditional folk forms and the practitioners of traditional folk forms, as well as the woman who makes the greater cake and the drops, also part of that culinary sector that were not counted, and that has not been counted in necessarily in that 6,000 to 12,000 persons that we estimate are actually in the sector. It does point, Mariel, as you rightly said, to a greater deal of mapping and data collection of the creative sectors across the Caribbean. So once again, this is I think the infamous slide on which you lost me the last time, where that the majority of persons who experience income loss as a result of COVID-19 were performing artists. And as Yuan and Dalia and Tamara explained as practitioners themselves, it is really that because the performing arts are so, it's characterized by freelance work, then you actually would see the income loss in that segment much higher than you would. So it was 160, about 61 persons who identified as performing artists who actually who said that they experienced loss of income. Then came artists, and then you had media practitioners in film and animation and video. I will say that the community tourism entities also spoke to the fallout from COVID-19, and we would of course understand why in relation to the complete shutdown of the tourism sector across the Caribbean, not just in Jamaica, but across the Caribbean. Then we asked the question, have you or your organization experienced cancellation, project cancellations or project delays, etc.? In this regard, we saw that the Jamaica Association of Composers, Artists and Publishers and their membership, which are singer-songwriters and primary rights holders, they were the ones who responded most to this survey, with about 55 of them indicating that yes, the impact on them has been great. And the reason why we posed this question in relation to the industry associations and the responses from the industry association is precisely what Dalia spoke about in relation to the need for practitioners to come together as in associations. And so you have JCAP, the second highest one, the light pink, if you can see that on your screen, is actually other. And it's disaggregated. But the purple speaks to the Film and Television Association, as well as the green being the Entertainers of Jamaica Association and the Book Industry Association, their members, speaking to just how what the impact of the loss has been on themselves as practitioners and on the sector itself. It is important, I think, coming from this, for practitioners to recognize the need to associate. If there is nothing that we should take from this particular slide, it is, please take the fact that associations become critical in times like these, because you can, in fact, band together, you can collaborate, you can partner, you can move that couch and that stove and that fridge that was part of that set, you can move it to the next person. And perhaps what it means is actually even finding ways, some kind of mechanism to actually have a set business where you're actually bartering, moving, renting the set, all of these pieces from the set for the next your other colleagues. Job loss as a result of COVID-19, 52.4% indicated that they were already laid off due to COVID-19. Of the persons who were not laid off, another 23.3% of them didn't know whether they were going to be laid off. And so they were in this kind of betwixt and between. They were neither fish nor fowl. And so it really, and most of the organizations who were planning to lay off persons at the time of the survey indicated that they would be letting go 1 to 5 of their workers due to the pandemic. This amounted to about 49% of their workforce. So next slide. The unanticipated spending. We asked persons, in addition to your income loss, what about money that you would have spent to put in additional health protocols? Money that you, for example, money you would have used to buy more masks, hand sanitizers, etc. And we found that the unanticipated spending was recorded among, once again, musicians, singers, etc. Whereas the Poetry Society and the Book Industry Association also indicated that they had experienced unanticipated spending due to COVID-19. Of course, performing artists came out on top because of the nature of their work. So the estimated unanticipated spending, 83.3% of the respondents experienced that unanticipated spending, and the remainder said that no, they didn't. But the average monthly unanticipated spending was 146,000 Jamaican dollars, and a maximum of 4.9 million Jamaican dollars. In total of that 83.3%, it would have been around 32.2 or 32.3 million Jamaican dollars. And of course, we can extrapolate so there's March, there's April. If we go into May, we're in May, June. I mean, we can extrapolate from this convenient sampling some kind of ballpark figures in relation to how deleterious the impact of the pandemic will be on various sectors. Same thing in relation to the reduced or restricted spending. What was significant in this is that there are persons who experience almost 100% restriction in relation to hiring of personnel. Of course, certainly travel would be, you'd have had travel being cut out by 100% because all the borders were closed and so on. So this is that slide would indicate that. Next slide. Other question was we asked respondents to indicate on a scale of 1 to 5 the expected severity of the COVID-19 on on themselves as individuals or on their organizations. And then we also ask correspondingly, what do you think the severity will be on the sector as a whole? And interestingly enough, most persons thought that the impact on the sector will be greater than the impact on them as individuals or on individual organizations. So 77.4% thought the impact on the extreme impact on the sector versus 65.4% thinking about themselves. And that also, I think, shows a kind of shift in the way that we have started to see a shift rather than on this individual focus, that we are also going a little bit more broadly and thinking on the impact on your own work pool, your sector, but also on your country and the region as a whole. So there are some themes that emerged. This slide goes to how persons. We asked for free-flowing answers on this one. They were open-ended, and we asked persons to speak to how COVID was actually impacting them. Persons spoke to the issue of emotional distress. It's very depressing and heartbreaking, one said. Another said financial drought, total shutdown of the sector, no tourists, no income, so I'm finding it hard to provide for my family. In relation to employment, COVID-19 has brought employment to a halt for the entertainment sector and for the 15 entertainers I employ. Another one said, we have lost all jobs and the bills are still there. Rent, utilities, loans, credit cards, etc. Hand-to-mouth living, so food is scarce. So we can see the impact on those entertainers or those creative persons within the tourism sector. And we can see it extrapolated across the rest of the society. So for those graphic designers, you saw the slide earlier in relation to artists and graphic designers. So those graphic designers who would have been employed, for example, on Carnival and pushing out flyers and all the imagery for that, or for the Calabash Literary Arts Festival that would be happening at the end of this month, you really see the full spectrum for those persons who would have gone on residencies, art residencies. Their sponsors would have pulled the funding, or at least halted the funding for that. So these are some really heart-wrenching impacts, but it does provide for the Ministry of Culture an opportunity, and this is what it has been doing, is providing us with an opportunity to see exactly how we can target our responses, and actually in order to build that kind of resilience within the sector, and to anchor and to facilitate the creative industries in a more meaningful way going forward. So I want to thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Jillian. I am so happy that we were able to hear the entirety of your presentation, and colleagues can now see why I wanted to begin there, because it gives us the kind of context for understanding in a snapshot view what kind of impact we've been having in terms of the cultural and creative industries within Jamaica. So I really want to thank you. Now we have Tamara back, and I had introduced Tamara previously, but just to remind us that Tamara joins us from Poland, the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. She is going to speak to us about the global perspectives and responses from creative cities to COVID-19.
Oh, sorry. Hello again. I'm very, very sorry. It's Friday evening in Poland, so everyone is watching Netflix, which may cause some difficulties with networks. Sorry for this. So we'll try to do it as brief as possible to make sure that we will have enough time for questions from the audience, which I think might be crucial for this discussion. So according to what just Jillian presented, I would like to look at the bright side of this situation and crisis that we are facing now. And according what Mariel previously said, is that we should look at the crisis at also as an opportunity for us to understand issues that we used to have and also opportunities that are just ahead us. So from Creative Cities perspective, what I can share with you is that what we just recently learned and we discussed is that, first of all, it's a very good time for us to appreciate what we used to have. Years of mobility, a lot of opportunities to work internationally, very easy access to travel, very easy access to get whatever we want. You know, I should mention also that it's my second time at Institute of Caribbean Studies. First time was in 2018, and I was there in person. I was there in person, which really was a bless. So that's the first thing. We should appreciate what we used to have, but also think about the future, sustainable development of our cities, of mobility, and also understand that we won't be able to come back to normality. It's going to be a new normal, totally different probably, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be the worst version of what we can have. So that's the first thing, the appreciation of what we used to have. And also, it showed us the situation that we are facing now, that we need systematic changes. It's not about small initiatives. Although all cities, they have their grant competitions, they have different ideas how to support their local industry. It's just an initiative. It's not something that's going to last. And if we will face another crisis, probably the situation will be more or less the same. So our common thought is that we need to acknowledge that creative industry brings about 10% of GDP, which means that there is a lot of people who are hired there and who just work on other people. So we should treat culture economy as an economy and think about systematic changes. So that's something that is very important for us, and we are trying to work on that. But also, what is maybe the most important thing for UNESCO Creative Cities of Music now is that although there are some differences in terms of geographic, in terms of political systems, in terms of even cultural differences, more or less we are on the same level now. So we face the same problems. Like I mentioned before, the figures even that Jillian mentions, they are more or less the same in Poland than in Jamaica. So maybe the scale is a bit different, but still we face the same problem around the world. So the most important for us now is just to find a way to survive first, but then to think about bigger changes, to bring to the table idea of creating a status of artists, to make sure that they will be protected. Because if you look at lockdown situation, what really helps us to survive this very difficult time of social distancing is culture at the first place. So can you imagine to be locked down at your home without books, without music, without Netflix, which I've mentioned before, or any other source of TV series or films? So probably it's impossible. So I strongly believe that culture is resistant enough to survive this very difficult situation, because we survive different crises in past, but still we should think about major changes regarding thinking of culture as a part of global economy. And like David Byrne used to say, we don't make music, music makes us. So I hope that it's gonna help us to survive. So thank you for now, and I hope that there will be some questions from the audience that we can go deeper to this subject. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you very, very much, Tamara. We heard those perspectives. We are not in any way different from the rest of the globe in terms of the cultural and creative industries. Yes, some industries are more organized. In fact, the question remains as to whether we really have functioning cultural and creative industries in the Caribbean. But that aside, and that's a debate for another time, We are here to consider the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the cultural and creative industries in the Caribbean. And of course, what we want to do is to make sure that at the end of the day, we have a resilient cultural and creative industries, a resilient creative sector. Just let me remind you before we turn our attention to the audience, want to thank our presenters once again. We have heard some fulsome conversations here, and I want to remind the audience that this is the first in a series of events. First of all, we are highlighting the Humanities in Action. This is the Humanities in Action virtual seminar series. The Institute of Caribbean Studies, as one of the departments in the Faculty of Humanities and Education, decided to kick off the discussion and to put culture and the creative industries on the map in terms of our discussions for highlight. So we're kicking off the series. This is the first part. In the second part, let me just give you a sense of who are the speakers coming up. We have Dr. Deborah Hickling, lecturer in cultural studies and cultural and creative economy from the Institute of Caribbean Studies, coming up next week. We resume May. We are in May, not March. May 22nd. We also have Miss Lydia Rose, General Manager from JCAP, the Jamaica Association of Composers and Authors and Publishers. Mr. Yuri Peshkov from the Culture Program. He is actually the Culture Program Specialist at Unesco's Cluster Office for the Caribbean. He's going to be talking to us about vulnerability shocks and protecting cultural diversity in Jamaica. We also have joining us next week Dr. Dennis Howard from the Institute of Cultural Policy and Innovation, and he also is an adjunct lecturer in music business management at the Institute of Caribbean Studies. Dr. Joanne Tull will join us from the St. Augustine campus of the UWI, lecturer in Carnival Studies in the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. So we have quite a number of speakers joining us to share their perspectives on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Caribbean, but more importantly, switching the lens, switching the conversation to focus on building a resilient creative future beyond this pandemic. We must, in fact, remember I started this morning with the lyrics from Wailing Souls, Jaja, give us life to live, so let us live. And that is, in fact, the inspiration behind the series, that we must take our assets, take our embarrassment of cultural riches, as I like to talk about in the Caribbean, and move forward to building a resilient creative future beyond this pandemic. I want to remind us of the questions we were posing for ourselves as we started the series, that we are considering a creative Caribbean reimagined for the age of coronavirus. What does it look like? What does a creative Caribbean reimagined for this age look like? We've been told by the scientists and the medical practitioners that this virus isn't going anywhere. This is something we have to learn to live with. So how can we learn from the COVID-19 crisis and its impact globally? So let me go to our first question from UWI TV's website. And I'm posing this question here. It's for Jillian. What are some of the ways in which the government of Jamaica, particularly through the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, has been responding to the plight of creatives in light of COVID-19 and the virtual lockdown of the entertainment sector? Mm-hmm. What initiatives?
Okay, so I'm going to speak generally in relation to what government has done. The first thing, of course, is the CARE initiative that came through the Ministry of Finance and Planning in relation to creatives. So their creatives were able to access grants through the Ministry of Finance. There was the compassionate grant as well as the general grants for creatives. The ministry itself is currently working on a specialized package for creatives, specifically. Okay, so I'm sorry were you hearing me before? Okay, so in addition to persons having benefited before under the care packet, we have been working on a special program, a special vehicle for creative practitioners. And of course, I want to tell you about what JBDC, Jamaica Business Development Corporation, has been doing in relation to webinars and training for creative practitioners.
Okay, thank you very much, Jillian. We also have another question from the UWI-TV website. Are there any partnerships, and I want to pose this to perhaps Yuan or Jillian. Jillian, this may be for you again. Are there any partnerships being explored with countries involved in the Creative Cities Network that could alleviate some of the challenges being faced by creatives in Jamaica?
Yuan, do you want to start on that one? Or you want me to start?
You can take that, Jillian. You can take that.
Okay. So there actually are quite a few in relation to music in particular. There's the Fête de la Musique. Tamara can also speak to some of these. The Fête de la Musique, which we have started to work on. I know that there are persons in Juria and other creatives that have had a strong interest in participation virtual Fête de la Musique, which happens in June of each year. We had for the International Jazz Day, there was a collaboration, in fact, on a music collaboration, which Music Unites. Rosina Moda was, an amazing collaborator on that one. And so that went off very well in relation to the city of Lira in Italy. And amidst their own emergence from the pandemic with almost 30,000 people dying, they decided that they wanted to do something to benefit the health workers in Italy and across the world. And so we collaborated as Creative Cities of Music with Lira in Italy on International Jazz Day inclusion. So that went off very well. We also have Australia, Adelaide in Australia has come up with a new program, which we're examining as we go along. We examine what has been presented by our sister cities, whether they are music cities or cities of gastronomy, of literature, of film, or craft and media art, all of those. But we examine them and see and send out to our practitioners. And absolutely, we stand ready to collaborate. I know that Tamara can talk some more on some of the other initiatives. And then there's the other one with there's a Women in Music program that has been ongoing and that we have been working on together. So go ahead, Tamara.
So what you've mentioned, Jillian, Fête de la Musique, it's our newest project, which will cover the 21st of June, which is Fête de la Musique, so the International Music Day. We will go online. We will have a music marathon for 24 hours. We'll present music from different creative cities. And the idea is that all musicians, they will be paid. So no one will play for free. No one will do it just for the idea. We will all make sure that they will be paid. And also we will raise the money for the charity organization, which helps healthcare internationally. So that's the one project that Jillian mentions. The gender equality project is also very important for us. We just started it 1 year ago, but because of pandemic, it wasn't that easy for us to work on that for months, but we are almost there. So we'll just publish short movies from each city, which will just cover the gender equality theme. And also International Jazz was extremely successful event, thanks to Mannheim, Germany, and Rainer Kern.
I forgot about Rainer.
Our good spirit, Rainer Kern. So it was more or less the same concept that Fête de la Musique. Although a lot of events that are going on online, we all know that it's kind of our future. So we just face the situation that probably most of events will be parallelly online and offline. in the future. So we are trying to make sure that UNESCO Creative Cities will be there, and we'll just bring as much music from the world as possible. Fête de la Musique is very special also, and that's something that we should mention, that the idea of the celebration, which was developed in France by Polish composer, which is very interesting as well, was that that's the only one day during the year that musicians are playing for free. They are just giving free concerts in a city public space or any other institutions. And our main idea for this celebration this year, is that they cannot afford to play for free anymore. So that's totally opposite. Our idea behind this project was that this year we have to pay them because they lost so much, and they will be losing till the end of the year. The newest report from CINAR, which is Canadian-based organization, shows that almost 45% events are already cancelled till the end of the year. And we all know that probably most of them will be. So we know that big music events, they will happen next spring, probably. And it means for many of people around the world that they lost the biggest source of incomes. We should face the situation, and we should just understand that music business is mostly based on live scene, not only CD sale or any other music distribution. It's live scene. So they lost the biggest source of income. That's why we decided that we should just promote this idea that, okay, at the beginning we should share our music, we should share it for free in a sense of bring it to community and give them relief from the very hard situation. But now it's our turn. We should support our music industry. So that's what Music Cities are doing. Sorry for this, maybe too long.
Thank you very much, Tamara. We have another question from Facebook, and I think perhaps I'll pose this one for Mariel. We've not been able to adequately realize the potential of the orange economy. This question says, Mariel, why do you think this is the case?
I believe one of the key reasons is that we haven't streamlined our approach to the orange economy across the region. And as small islands, we don't have the capacity individually to really achieve economies of scale, for one. And while, the individual music product or the character of a particular country's product is very, very important, in order to be competitive on the global scene, we also need to build our industry, as a region and not simply as individual islands. So I think that's one of the major challenges that we faced. I think another challenge would be that, we haven't collected enough data on the sector to justify to other agencies and governments the need to invest, substantially in the development of the creative industries. So that would be a second area. And I mean, governments are definitely now moving in that direction, and it's regional governments that have really mandated the formation of this fund as a streamlining initiative. But we, of course, need more of that. I think a third reason would be that we need to recognize the transversal nature of our creative industries. That is, that they intersect in very, very meaningful ways with other industries, from tourism to, education, of course, to urban planning and so on. And the more that we get our practitioners, our creative practitioners, involved in integral ways in building these different sectors and bringing a new way of thinking to these sectors, is the more that we will find a creative industry that's more sustainable and that is integrating with society and contributing to society in meaningful ways. As it is now, because our practitioners are often doing, earning livelihoods via gigging, they're not contributing to the formal structure of society and paying taxes and so on, and they're afraid of that. And they don't understand what that involves, and they don't feel as though the society is contributing to supporting their well-being and their welfare, because we still, as a society, feel as though it is it's okay to ask artists who are already struggling to, play concerts for free, to, contribute a painting as a donation to charity, when the nature of exhibitions, visual arts exhibitions, is that they could only really happen every 6 months. So how are you going to then ask someone who is, subsisting on that kind of basis to contribute an entire painting for, just to give away to charity, because they're in need of charity themselves in certain ways. So we need to really formalize the economies surrounding the creative industry. So there are a whole number of reasons, but those are just a few of them.
That I think gives us a good summary. And of course, the regional initiatives toward formalizing these industries, of course, we have managed to see a number of ways in which we have advanced in that regard, and there's much further to go. And of course, we know that there are initiatives as well coming on stream. So we hope to see some more in terms of formalization and the interest of governments, national governments, but also the regional structures that are in place to be able to push for the greater formalization of these industries. So thank you very much for that.
Sure. I think I add one point though on a more individual level, because I spoke really on a kind of national and agency level, but on an individual level in terms of our societies as well, we need to buy local. That is the long and short of it. We need to commit to buying local clothes, local foods, etc. And if we don't, as societies, become wedded to that idea, it would be hard for us to get past where
let me bring in you on here to comment on why it is we have not been able to more formally establish the orange economy.
Thank you, Dr. Naya. This is a subject on which I'm very passionate, and we have a traditional structure in the region that sees creative endeavor as extracurricular. And that is why Mariel just mentioned somebody will come and ask you to give a painting as a contribution to charity, but those persons will not come and pay to observe an exhibition. When we're writing policy, we write policy for infrastructure. And when we speak of infrastructure, that infrastructure never contemplates the creative economy. How then do we expect to be able to receive or to maximize its potential if we are not putting systems in place? From the education system, all of us, when we went to primary school or prep school to high school, we were preparing ourselves, or we were being prepared for an economy that gave respect and regard to professionals. The professionals we speak about are the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers, and probably if you become a lecturer, they don't ask you a lecturer in what. You're perceived to be serious. But if you're a lecturer in the cultural and creative industries, you're a less serious lecturer, regardless of what it is that you're doing. And so structurally, from an issue of governments in general, we have a challenge, right? We have a challenge generally. And so because we don't take a strategic approach to having our economies properly organize themselves, we will always have an issue. Students are not going to look towards professions in the cultural and creative industries in the volumes that they should. Good policy is not going to be written from the perspective that is where our competitive advantage is. So we will always lean to manufacturing, and we'll always lean to tourism. But if you look, for example, at what happened in Jamaica last year at about this time, when we moved from Rebel Salute to Reggae Month, to Coffee Festival, to Rum Festival, to Buju and Carnival. Transportation in the city of Kingston, in fact, in all of Jamaica, was impacted. Flights were impacted. Hotels and Airbnb were impacted. Good. Supermarkets, farmers, the entire economy, because of the backward and forward linkages that come as a result of entertainment. And it is one of the few areas that can guarantee you that kind of linkage regionally. And until our government see it, until our development banks see it, then we won't be able to encourage industry. And if we can't encourage industry properly, we can't benefit from it.
Thank you very much, Yuan. I mean, those perspectives I also share. We have seen the ways in which the entertainment, even the nexus between entertainment and tourism serves us well for advancing the formalization of the sectors, the cultural and creative sectors I'm speaking of here. And I don't know, we just have to continue to make the kind of noise we've been making. And certainly one of the things I'm big on is to have a data-driven approach to the ways in which we advocate for greater formalization of the sector. But let me take another question from the UWI-TV website. While there are conflicting opinions based on scientific and economic imperatives regarding the opening of the economy, let me ask, Jillian and Yuan yourself. This is open to anyone, but let me pose this to Yuan and Jillian. How are we preparing for a return to normalcy in the creative sector? Yuan, you take this first.
Well, thank you, Dr. There are several conversations going on right now. Good. There's a flurry of conversations happening, from booking agents to artists themselves to creative practitioners in general, whether they are stand-up comedians or actors or writers. Because we know that nothing lasts. But even if this lasts forever, we have to be prepared for a new normal. Not going back to the old normal at all. I was speaking to one of our practitioners the other day, and he was reminding me, Chris Daly, he was saying that because of the conversation that happened between himself and Dalia in one context, he was like, why, I don't know, why weren't we doing the truth that the people are preparing, one, to present their work in a more packaged way, in a more digital way. Dalia mentioned it earlier. People are getting larger audiences now. How do we then reimagine our presentations so that they are fit for a screen, a telephone screen, a laptop, an iPad? How do we present it? How does the lady in Bugwalk who's been telling stories now find that she needs to get the right lighting, she needs to get the right amount, the right strength of Wi-Fi, and so on? All of these conversations are going on so we can equip each other with tools to present what we have. I mean, one of the grants, for example, and Jillian will speak more about this, that the Ministry of Culture is looking at, is a grant to retool creatives in order for them to digitally disseminate their content.
All right.
I think Dr. Naya, oh yes, thank you, Dr. Naya. A part of what we really, I think our survey showed something very interesting, which, as I said, pointed to the need for collaboration and partnership. In Jamaica, I think we tend towards individualism, and I think post-COVID, we really need to consider, as creatives, greater collaboration across the sectors and within the sectors. So the need for industry associations to be strengthened. That strengthening of industry associations is critical, because that is really what will drive your lobbying and advocacy efforts to government. The strength of those associations will mean the difference between $1 or 100. And I think it has become more and more clear in this crisis that when you collaborate and you have strong advocacy, then there is that movement and the push to government that is necessary. As I said, there's a balancing that needs to happen as well. So formality, informality, it really, the COVID is saying to us that there are things that private sector ought to do. There are things that non-governmental organizations ought to do, and there are things that government must do. So it really also is kind of separating and placing us. Post-COVID is telling us that everybody has their place, and we need to play that very important role as government to facilitate and to enable investment, to facilitate and enable practitioners, whichever sector they're in. But since we're talking about culture and the creative industries, that we need to enable them to do and to be and to produce and be productive. And this, I think, is one of the emerging things that we're seeing, especially in relation to our sampling.
May I, Dr.?
Yes, Dalia, I was about to call on you, actually. But comment first, and then I will pose a question to you.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that we need to begin to broaden what we see as cultural and creative roles and jobs. So, for example, we have associations, but some of them are primarily made up of the creative being. From my experience, the creative being does not want to take the minutes, write up the projects, do the filing, ask for the grants. And so there is a space for the individual who is the cultural administrator. There's a space for the person who is the cultural project coordinator or the project manager. In this digital space, there is a space for the content director, who will probably say to a comedian or to an actor, listen, if you're going to get a phone that you're going to use to create content, this is the phone that you need to use. And the sound has to be at this level, or the lighting has to be, as Johan had said. So I think sometimes we can multitask, but I think multitasking also requires being able to do the tasks and have the competence to do them. And we have to start opening up what we see as the cultural and creative industry and the kind of jobs that are available, so that people with other skill sets see themselves as a part of this industry as well.
Thank you very much, Dalia. I want to, sure.
Yeah, just regarding what Johan said. Yeah, regarding what Johan said about digital events and that we should just get used to it going online. I agree and disagree at the same time, because what Mariel said, I think that new normality brings us more to locality. So what will be probably the most important thing now is that we should rediscover what we have on a local level and understand how big resources we have there on a local level, and then go to online. Because how many Zoom conversation you had today? For me, as it's 6-7 p.m., I had 12 of them. I'm really fed up of that. I really don't want to have any online meeting anymore. Like, the moment that pandemic will be over, the first thing I will do, I will go to my office and meet with my colleagues in person, because online is okay as long as it's going in a parallel with offline. So I think that post-COVID situation will be more connected to what we have on a local level, and will be more connected to appreciate it, the people that we used to work, and now we are not able to meet with them. So that's the only one remark I have, that I'm not sure that it's going to be so much connected with online.
So appreciating more of what we have had, not necessarily returning to a pre-COVID time, but being able to live with the COVID-19 crisis, and also being able to appreciate more of what we have. That's very important, and I wanted us to be able to remember that in building a resilient, creative future, one of the things we must be able to do is to put the structures in place at the social, economic, and also the cultural levels, but also in terms of formalizing our sectors. We must be able to put the strategies in place to be able to move forward. So there's a question we have from Facebook, and I want to have, this is for Dalia. What advice would you offer to young persons who are considering a career in the creative industries, but maybe discouraged, Dalia, by their families due to this COVID-19 situation? What do we advise them?
Well, one of the first things I would advise them is, when the discussion about opening the economy happens, I think the creative industry is a part of the economy that some of it just never closed. It kept happening. I'll use Sprinter as an example. That Sprinter is a Jamaican film. It opened here in Jamaica. Didn't attract as many people as they had hoped. It's now on Netflix. And since Sprinter has been on Netflix, more Jamaicans have seen it than when it was open here at the cinemas. And people are writing me in Africa and everywhere else. So that's one of the things I would say, help them to understand the scope of the creative industry and what it can bring to you. I don't want to call profession names because I get myself in trouble, but sometimes I say to them, when you compare the income that an artist makes to some profession names, the artist makes more. Yuan smiles, but it is true. The artist makes more. To me, I tell young people, though, do your research, and whatever career you're going into, respect the field. No one gets up and says, I want to be a lawyer or a doctor, and you're a lawyer or a doctor in a month or a week or 2 years. I find that people want to enter the creative industry and they want to be a professional. So they write one play and then they say, I am a writer. And one play does not, in my opinion, make you a professional writer. So you have to try to develop the skills, develop the competence, put some respect now on the career that you're trying to be a part of. And if you do that, I guarantee you'll not only have longevity, but more than likely you'll be more successful than somebody else who is just going off talent alone. Talent alone will not get you anywhere in this business. Some of our greatest people, Bob Marley, work ethic. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dalia. Now I know we intended to have a 2-hour discussion this morning. We don't want people to be having any cyber inertia, or, as Tamara reminded us, any kind of, jet lag. But this is, of course, the online lag. We want to just now ask our speakers, any final remarks from you? Tell us, what would you want to leave your audience with this morning? Final remarks. Let me start with Jillian.
Thank you, Dr. Niall, and colleagues on the panel. I want to thank you for your very inspiring and thought-provoking presentations. And for our listeners and viewers, my parting shot, I guess, will be on the need to collaborate, the need to partner, the need to understand that there's no need as a creative to be the lone voice crying out in the wilderness. John already did that for us. And so it means, therefore, that the resources that you have are within your pool of persons, and where you don't have that, it's right, as we have been hearing, it's local. It's right near to you. It's closer to you than you think. And it does require some research. It does require some amount of effort on your part, but the collaborations and the partnerships need to happen going forward in order to bring the creative industries in Jamaica to that final step. Register on the entertainment registry so that we can get so that we can provide you with information and provide the kinds of incentives to the sector. So the National Registry of Entertainment and Creative Industries Practitioners, please register, sign up so that benefits can accrue to you as a creative practitioner. And that, by the way, will be the one of the mechanisms by which persons will be able to benefit under any kind of program that the ministry has for COVID stimulus or COVID relief. So register, collaborate, partner with each other, and we will get over this. And I want to just bless you all. Thank you.
Let me turn to Yuan Simpson for his final remarks.
What I'd like to say in closing is that we need to open our minds to a new way of partnering. We need to open our minds to the immense potential of partnering across borders while we look closer to home for solutions. At the end of the day, there is a lot of potential reposed in the little things we ourselves as creatives sometimes use for our own entertainment that could actually be income generating for us. There's some things we take for granted, the conversations we have, the images we share, the ideas we bounce about of people that really have immense economic potential if we think about it and if we stop taking some elements of what we do for granted. Some of the things that traditionally were taken for granted by the Maroons, for example, were then monetized by someone else. And suddenly we began to call those persons thieves. So one of the things we need to do is to look around us for what we have that we know can be of value to others and think about structured ways to share it. Those are my parting words.
Thank you so much, Yuan. And as I move to Mariel for her closing remarks, just want to remind our viewers on Facebook and online at UETV Global, want to remind you that this is the first in a series, most importantly, the Humanities in Action series, that we come to you again next week at the same time, next week, Friday, May 22nd at 10 a.m. for a lineup of another set of speakers. And I will tell you a little bit more about those as I close. But now we move to Dr. Mariel Barrow.
Thank you. And thank you as well to my co-panelists who have been very inspirational. It's always lovely to get together with persons who are invested in the creative industries. It's refreshing. So in terms of what I would like to leave the audience with, it's also has to do with collaboration. I think we're all on that point. That is a pivotal and seminal point. But I think we really need to explore and examine the dimensions of different types of collaborations and partnerships, because within these frameworks, there are always power dynamics. And a lot of creatives become quite intimidated by those power dynamics. There's a lot that can be lost, even though there's a lot that can be gained. And so I think what we need to share as creatives as well is the different tools for collaboration. We need a toolkit of effective ways of collaborating vertically and horizontally, meaning with our co-practitioners in terms of visual artists with visual artists or visual artists with musician, but also with what Yuan was speaking about in terms of public-private partnerships and so on. And I think that we should focus on building that repertoire of tools for collaboration so that we may be more effectively able to establish that as a pillar within, in terms of how the sector operates. And then finally, artists are the ones who reimagine the world and who move us from crisis to growth historically. And so I want artists themselves to remember that, even though this is for many, a very painful time. Birth is always painful. And I think the creative energy and creative force within us is a force majeure in itself. And so if we think of ourselves differently as creative people, to transform our own minds and our own perspectives during this time, we'll be able to make meaning out of this time in a way that is going to impact our nations and transform the way that they think of the creative industries and the role the creative industries play in our society.
Thank you very much, Mariel. And I move to Dalia Harris for her final comments in this session.
Thank you very much, Doug. Well, one of the main things I want to say is we have to be prepared. Once COVID-19 hit, we saw other creatives in other countries quickly maximizing the digital space because they were ready to do so. And I think for many of us, we still haven't even gotten off the ground. We're just realizing that this can happen. So we have to think ahead now and think to ourselves, post-COVID, if there's ever a post-COVID, what is it that we have to do? And the second thing I want us to think about is opening our minds to who our markets are. The brands of the Caribbean, the music of the Caribbean is something that resonates worldwide. And so we have to stop thinking about just getting people in this parish. Can I get enough people in Kingston to come and see my work? Can I get enough people, some people from in Trinidad can come to Jamaica? There are millions of people in other continents. We tend to sometimes get so caught up in the West that there are millions of people in other continents that love us, that want to be inspired by us. And I think mentally that's where we need to aim and where we need to go.
Thank you very much, Dalia. And finally now to turn to Tamara, who will give us her final remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. So first of all, I would encourage you to look at this time, look at the bright side of this time, difficult time still, and as an opportunity to find new way to collaborate, which was mentioned before, to find new partners, to rethink your strategies, your ideas, your idea in many different ways. But at the end, what I want to tell you is don't worry about the thing, because every little thing is gonna be all right.
And what better way to end? Oh my goodness. So we start essentially how we began this morning. Jaja, give us life to live. Every little thing is going to be all right. The creatives have, in fact, given us the tools to sustain ourselves in this crisis. We have to be responsible, however, and think not only about the crisis and what kind of impact we have been having, but also how to build a resilient creative future beyond this COVID-19 pandemic. And that's what we are here for. The Institute of Caribbean Studies and the Reggae Studies Unit at the University of the West Indies, we've been at this for some 33 years, making an impact on cultural pedagogy, on policy, on creative industries. And we told you a little bit this morning about our programs in cultural and creative industries, or programs in cultural studies, or program in applied cultural studies. And we want to be able to continue to serve you, continue to serve the region in the ways that we have, and also in new ways, in light of the ways in which we have to now rethink and reimagine ourselves in the context of this pandemic. So we thought it best, in the context of this Humanities in Action virtual seminar series, to kick off our conversations with the cultural, very much close to home, to determine how do we want to think ourselves through this crisis, how do we want to think ourselves into the future, into the 22nd century, because this is one pandemic, but who is to tell when we will have another? Who is to tell whether we will really reconcile the differences in the opinions we're getting from science versus the culturalists versus the policymakers? Who is to tell when we will have any kind of consensus in how to move forward? But we know for sure that we have to re-emerge from this crisis stronger, bigger, better, more aligned, more fit for purpose, and certainly more committed. So I want to thank, therefore, the ICS staff, the Institute of Caribbean Studies. We have had a brilliant team working on this series. We want to be able to thank Cadian Williams, Bettine, Ross Laws, the persons who are at the center of thinking through the creative industries, the cultural and creative industries, Dr. Deborah Hickling. I want to thank all our presenters, Tamara, Jillian, Dalia, Yuan, Mariel. Want to be able to thank all of you for your contributions this morning. And as I close out our conversation, just to remind you that we will join you next week, Friday, again, for another in the series. We will join you with Dr. Deborah Hickling, Miss Lydia Rose, Mr. Yuri Peshkov from Unesco, Mrs. Olainka Jacobs-Bonnick from the South-South Collective, Dr. Dennis Howard, and also Dr. Joanne Tull. We will have another brilliant lineup of speakers for you. I want to thank most of all the UETV team. We could not have done this without the partnership with UETV that we have been ably guided by Janet Carew and Maxi Baldeo. We want to be able to thank them for their dedication, for the work that they are doing. We could not have been coming to you live without this kind of organization. And the University of the West Indies, of course, a formidable Caribbean institution, top 4% of universities in the world. This is why we are here. We're not running a patty shop. We are absolutely very clear about our work. And we come to you with that confidence and with that perspective as we share on building a resilient, creative future beyond COVID-19. Thank you very much all. This has been wonderful. See you next week.